Welcome back, sleepyheads. You've slipped into another long evening with history. Before Silas steps onto the docks, a word from the voice behind the clock. You know, the one who winds these walks and then lets them breathe. Boston Harbor, 4th of July, 1776. Not fireworks yet, not speeches in the marble halls, just salt air, creaking ships, and a young rebellion deciding whether it truly means what it's about to declare. You see, empires don't fall loudly at first, they shift quietly on the tide. It's the perfect place for a quiet walk. History isn't celebrating yet, it's holding its breath. If you enjoy drifting through the moments right before the world changes, stay close. Join the sleepy circle. Let's begin.
Chapter 1. The Harbor Holds Its Breath. Welcome, listeners. I'm Silas, your chronically time jet-lag guide to history's more questionable mornings. If you enjoy my voice softly narrating humanity's "What were we thinking?" moments, go ahead and like the video. It helps more dreamers and insomniacs find their way here. Subscribe, tap the bell, and let me know where you're listening from. I promise I won't stalk you, unless you're hiding in a colonial tavern with unpaid ale, in which case we might both be in trouble. Now, take a slow breath in and out. Let the present fade a little. We're going back to a harbor where an empire is pretending everything's fine, and a handful of stubborn colonists are quietly disagreeing. The year is 1776. The city is Boston. It's the 4th of July, but no fireworks yet. Just nerves, gunpowder, and a harbor holding its breath. Let's begin. The first thing that hits me is the smell. Long Wharf smells like salt, tar, wet wood, and the faint metallic tang of old anger. The harbor water slaps lazily against the pilings, dark and opaque like it's keeping secrets. Above it, ropes creak and rigging sighs, a forest of masts scratching at the pale morning sky. The sun is just dragging itself over the horizon, rubbing sleep out of its eyes, as if even it's not sure it wants to witness today. My boots land softly on the timbers, hollow thuds on thick old planks worn smooth by a century of cargo and bad decisions. The boards have a subtle give, like they remember every overloaded cart and drunken sailor who staggered across them. Somewhere to my left, a gull screams at another gull with the intensity of a political argument. Fitting. Ahead of me, the harbor is not empty. British warships sit out there like bad omens, hulking silhouettes with stiff lines and too many teeth. Their hulls are black and hulking, their sails furled, cannons tucked in like a cat pretending it's not about to pounce. A red ensign flaps lazily from a masthead, snapping once, sharply, in the morning wind, like the Union Jack just insulted someone in passing. I walk farther out toward the water's edge, lantern in hand, more out of habit than necessity. The daylight is rising, but the mind likes a small, warm circle in its grip. The iron smell of cannons and rust drift faintly from moored ships and stacked guns. Voices overlap in low tones, English and colonial accents blending like a song where nobody agreed on the key. The air feels thick with anticipation is too elegant a word. It's more like anxiety that learned to stand up straight. And then the harbor speaks. Not a gentle clearing of the throat. Not a polite signal. Boom! A British cannon test fires from one of the warships, a single shot ripping across the water. The sound doesn't just echo, it punches. It slams into the chest, rattles in the ribs, bounces off the warehouses and comes back for seconds. A flock of Birds explodes out of hiding, like someone just told them taxes were going up. I flinch. The body always respects gunpowder, no matter how many centuries you visit, and plant my boots a little wider. The lantern shivers in my hand. For a second, the world is just noise and the smell of fresh smoke, curling low and blue over the water. Well, I murmur, when my lungs remember their job again, nothing like a little naval percussion ensemble to say, "Good morning, Boston." British Navy, masters of overkill as an alarm clock. Down the wharf, the ripple of reaction runs through the people. A dock worker mutters a curse sharp enough to peel paint. Two boys stop rolling a barrel and stare at the warship like it just insulted their mothers. A woman near a stack of crates tightens her shawl around her shoulders, her eyes never leaving the horizon. It's not the first boom she's heard, and it won't be the last. The shot was just a test, of course. Practice, calibration. Whatever word makes it sound less like a warning. The cannon's smoke curls upward, thinning in the sharp morning air, but the feeling it leaves behind doesn't dissipate. It lingers like a question nobody wants to answer. I move on, the boards of Long Wharf groaning faintly under my weight. To my right, barrels are stacked in uneven towers. Molasses, rum, salt, gunpowder, and the occasional mystery blend that probably shouldn't be near an open flame or a careless thought. Ropes coil like sleeping snakes beside them, tarred and dark. The harbor wind pushes in, cool and damp, riffling through canvas and loose coats. It carries the faint scent of fish, old storms, and a future trying to push its way through the present. A sailor trudges past me, his hat skewed, eyes red-rimmed from a night without enough sleep and maybe too much everything else. He pauses, glances back toward the warship that fired. Just a test? He grumbles to no one in particular, maybe to himself. Just a test. Isn't it always? I murmur. Long Wharf narrows slightly as I move inland, but the sense of exposure lingers. Out by the water, the British ships are the ceiling of the world. Closer in, the warehouses start to loom. Brick and timber bulkheads flanking the way like massive silent judges. The cobblestones meet the end of the wharf in an uneven handshake. Wood to stone, harbor to city. It's like stepping from a ship's deck onto the spine of something bracing for impact. On my left, a cluster of men are rolling powder barrels off a cart. They move with a careful urgency, their faces serious, their hands practiced. One man barks orders in that gruff, perpetual, almost angry tone people use when they're actually terrified something will go wrong. Easy, easy with that one. You drop it. We all meet God early, and I don't have a clean shirt ready. I drift past, keeping to the edge, the way you instinctively do when someone's juggling explosives. One barrel thuds onto the dock with a hollow, heavy sound, the kind of noise that says, "Inside me is a bad day waiting for a spark." The line of warehouses ahead pulls me toward Customs House Square. The facades are an orderly row of colonial teeth. Brick fronts, wooden shutters, pitched roofs. Somewhere behind them, ledgers are being balanced, profits counted, loyalties debated. Someone is calculating how much independence will cost. The sun is higher now, pushing gold light between the buildings, turning lingering smoke from that cannon blast into ghostly banners drifting across the street. A horse clops past, hooves sparking softly on stone. A cart creaks. A woman adjusts a basket on her hip and hurries by, eyes down, as if not seeing soldiers will make them less real. I'm almost to Customs House Square when it happens. It's a small thing, at first. A muttered warning, a clatter, a brief tangle of shadow and motion near the stack of powder barrels behind me at the wharf's junction. I turn instinctively, listening. A sailor, younger than his beard wants to admit, stumbles. His boot catches on a coiled rope. His hand, holding a lantern that should absolutely not be where it is, swings wild in the air. The world contracts to a single line of fire. The lantern slips from his fingers and arcs downward, time slowing into that syrupy cinematic crawl we all know too well. The lantern's flame flickers wildly, caged behind thin soot-streaked glass. Below it, wood, oil stains, powder barrels. A short list of things that do not play well together. Don't, I whisper, as if gravity negotiates. It doesn't. The lantern hits the planks with a sharp crack, glass spiderwebbing. For a split second, the flame blinks, uncertain. Then it lunges sideways into a smear of oil, delighted. Fire kisses the wood, a thin, hungry tongue of orange and blue. It races along a dark streak, right toward the nearest barrel. Someone screams, "Water! Water!" Men surge into motion, grabbing sacks, coats, anything that might smother a young flame before it grows teeth. The barrel loader, the one with the gruff voice, is suddenly moving faster than physiology should allow. He slams his shoulder into the nearest barrel, shoving it back from the spreading blaze. For half a heartbeat, I imagine the worst-case scenario. One brave lantern, one bad angle, and Long Wharf becomes a brief, impressive meteor event. The flame finds the base of the barrel and leaps up, stoked by oil. A ring of light flares around the wood. The men descend on it like furious ants. A sack slaps down, then another. A boot scuffs the fire, sending sparks skittering. The wharf fills with the frantic percussion of survival. Shouted orders, coughing, the slap of wet cloth, the scrape of barrels being hauled backward. A blast doesn't come. Instead, there's a long, painful moment where everything holds. Breath, hands, history. And then the flame chokes, guttering under suffocating fabric. A thin snake of smoke wafts up, smelling of burned oil and almost death. One last ember glows defiantly, then dies. The silence afterward is heavier than the noise was. I let out a breath I honestly wasn't aware I'd been holding. Nearby, someone laughs. A short, hysterical bark cut off halfway through, like they're afraid finishing it would be disrespectful. The big loader peels the sack away from the now smudged barrel, eyes wide, face pale beneath his beard. He turns slowly to the young sailor, who is standing rigid, pupils blown wide, hands empty. "You," the loader says, voice very calm in the way thunderstorms are calm just before they hit. "Are banned from carrying anything that glows. Ever. Candle, lantern, hopeful idea. None of it." A ripple of shaky laughter stirs around them. The tension leaks out in frayed edges. One man claps the young sailor on the back with a force that's half affection, half punishment. "Congratulations, boy," another mutters. "You almost started the first fireworks of the day. Might have been your last performance." I watch them regroup, stamping soot, restacking barrels a little farther from the treacherous oil stains. The air is threaded with the acrid sting of burned fuel, mixed with salt and tar, and the faint sweetness of molasses from a cracked barrel nearby. The harbor wind tries to carry the smell away, but it clings. Boston, I think, is not quite ready for fireworks of that magnitude. Not yet. The celebration will have to wait for words, before it earns its explosions. I turn back toward Customs House Square, feet whispering over the stone where the wharf spills into the city. The square opens ahead like a stage waiting for actors, merchants, clerks, sailors, soldiers. Tall buildings look down with impassive faces, their brickwork steady, their windows catching hints of the harbor light. In a few hours, news will ripple through these streets. Words written in distant Philadelphia will be read, repeated, misquoted, argued, and believed. Or not. The British warships will still sit in the harbor, offended geometry against the morning sky. Hunger and fear and anger and hope will still share cramped rooms and houses up and down these lanes. But right now, the harbor has spoken twice. Once with a cannon, once with almost fire. And both times, it has said the same thing. Nothing about this day is safe. I pause at the edge of the square, listening. There's the creak of a signboard, the mutter of distant conversation, the rattle of wagon wheels on stone. Somewhere a church bell clears its throat, preparing for its roll. The air feels expectant, like the city has inhaled and forgotten how to let go. History, I murmur, is not subtle, especially not here. Ahead of us lies the rest of Boston. Arguments in taverns, secret documents, trembling voices rising above the noise. Today, an empire will be challenged not with muskets, but with sentences. And the harbor, with all its cannons and near-miss explosions, will silently watch a more dangerous thing ignite, an idea. For now, breathe with me. Slow in, slow out. Let the echo of that cannon fade. Let the smell of smoke thin to memory. We've only taken our first steps off Long Wharf. Boston hasn't started celebrating yet. It's just bracing. Chapter 2. Whispers in the streets. Fury in the alleys. Stops 3 and 4. Dock Square. King Street. Site of Boston Massacre. The closer I get to Dock Square, the more Boston sounds like someone shaking a bag of nervous cats. Carts rattle. Hooves clatter. People murmur in pockets of tense conversation, always with one eye tilted toward the harbor, just to make sure the British ships haven't suddenly decided to start swimming toward shore. The air feels thick enough to chew. Welcome to Dock Square, I whisper to myself, where commerce is brisk, tempers are brisker, and everyone is pretending they didn't hear that cannon a few minutes ago. Vendors are out, technically, but no one is really selling. A fishmonger half-heartedly waves a cod at passers-by, but even he keeps pausing mid-sentence to look over his shoulder. A woman with a bread tray mutters prayers between transactions, counting loaves like they're children. A man hawking apples hasn't noticed 2 have rolled away down the street. He's too busy scanning rooftops like a squirrel, expecting sniper fire. I move deeper into the square, the chatter rising like steam. Rumors, guesses, warnings, and the occasional, "No, my cousin heard it from his cousin, and he knows a guy in the militia, so it's true." And then I see it. A man moving briskly through the crowd, shoulders hunched, hat pulled low. Too neat, too polished, too powdered. He slips between carts with the speed of someone who has practiced being chased, which is convenient because he is. Behind him, 3 men weave through the square with an energy that radiates. We are absolutely not about to do something legal. Their fists clench, their jaws flex, and one looks like he's arguing with the moral part of himself, and losing. I slow my pace instinctively, letting the scene play out ahead of me. The crowd parts just enough to give me a line of sight as the well-dressed man bolts into a side alley. A loyalist. You can smell the wigs on them. The 3 pursuers follow, one spitting the word Tory like it's poison. Another mutters something about British bootlicker, which is honestly quite a talent given the British are still several hundred feet offshore. I pause at the mouth of the alley, but don't step in. Time travel comes with two rules. Don't interrupt history. Don't get punched in the face while not interrupting history. The alley is narrow, hemmed in by timbered walls and stacked crates. The loyalist backs up until he hits a barrel. His hands shoot up. Please, gentlemen, I've done nothing. We know what you are. The first man growls. Your mouth's written more letters to the crown than the postmaster. The loyalist trembles so hard the lace at his collar vibrates. I watch from the threshold, my lantern dim to a soft hush. The tension in the alley coils tight, like a musket being loaded. No one throws a punch, but the threat of it hangs thick enough to thicken the air. A vendor across the street glances over, sees the standoff, and makes the universal face of, I'm not getting involved. I have enough problems. Finally, the loyalist stammers out something unintelligible, something about loyalty and law and just doing what's right, which is exactly the wrong thing to say to three men who have been living under what's right as defined by bayonets. One of the patriots steps closer. Run home, he says, and stay indoors. If the British want to find you today, let 'em look behind closed shutters. The loyalist doesn't need to be told twice. He bolts past them, nearly tripping, over his own refined shoes. The patriots watch him flee, their faces tight with a fury sharpened for years. I step back into the flow of the square, letting the alley shrink behind me. Even the buildings seem to watch. Boston, I murmur to the air, where even arguments are historically significant. The tension of Dock Square follows me as I drift toward King Street, the site of the Boston Massacre just 6 years earlier. The stones here remember blood. They hold it the way old trees hold lightning scars. The street is quieter, but not calm. A group of Continental soldiers stands near several crates stacked against a building wall. The crates are marked with the cheerful painted word, molasses, which immediately tells me they do not contain molasses. The soldiers pry open the lid of the first crate. The wood cracks with a groan, and one man leans in and stops. Then, slowly, carefully, he reaches inside and lifts out a handful of black grainy powder that catches the light. Gunpowder. Molasses never looked like that, I whisper. Another soldier pulls something else from the crate. A folded red coat. British uniform, clean and pressed. The kind that usually comes attached to a man holding a musket. A third soldier unrolls a packet of papers, scanning them with narrowed eyes. Even from a distance, I can see the careful handwriting. Someone British, meticulous, tidy, exactly the kind of person you never trust with secrets. One soldier whistles. They were stockpiling right under us. Well, I mutter to no one. Boston has never been good at subtlety. Even espionage is done with the volume up. Another cannon booms faintly from offshore. A reminder, a growl, a throat clearing of imperial displeasure. The noise ripples through King Street. People pause, shoulders tense. The soldiers don't stop. They move from crate to crate, uncovering more powder, more uniforms, more neat handwriting filled with supply tallies and commands. If the British were planning something, they were doing it with the organizational clarity of a well-run bakery. Only instead of pastries, it's gunpowder, and instead of customers, it's revolution. I let the atmosphere sink in, the grit in the air, the murmured curses, the heavy smell of powder mixing with sea salt. Above us, a sign creaks. Someone slams a window. A dog barks once sharply, as if adding commentary. King Street has always held echoes of violence. Today, it holds anticipation, the kind that curls under the ribs and waits. History, I whisper, is leaning forward, listening. It feels true, and it feels like Boston is about to answer. Chapter 3. Before the nation takes its first breath. Faneuil Hall comes into view like a brick furnace with opinions. Even from half a block away, I can hear it. Boston's favorite pastime, yelling about politics so loudly the air warms from friction. I turn the corner just in time to see two merchants squared off in front of the hall's open doors, waving their arms as though trying to swat each other's arguments out of the sky. "This is freedom," the first man bellows. He's red in the face, like someone who has been marinating in patriotism and rum. "This is suicide." The other fires back, chest puffed, hair disheveled, in the style of a man who hasn't slept since the Stamp Act. People gather, forming a loose circle, like a crowd waiting for a street performance, except the performance is verbal combat, and the stakes are existential. The first merchant jabs a finger at the hall. "Independence means standing on our own 2 feet. "Independence," the second scoffs, "means being crushed under a British boot with no legal recourse. Remember that part?" Someone shouts, "Let 'em argue, saves us the trouble." Another mutters, "Hope they tire each other out before tea time." I lean casually against a post, lantern hanging from my fingers. I'm not saying I'm enjoying the show, but if someone sold popcorn on this street, I'd be considering a purchase. The bell tower behind them tolls a single, heavy note. Neither man pauses. Instead, they yell over it, because nothing says future democracy like refusing to yield even to a bell meant for God or government. As I drift away from the debate, the echoes follow me like angry seagulls. Boston isn't just thinking about independence. It's chewing on it, arguing with it, occasionally spitting it out, then picking it back up to gnaw some more. The energy shifts as I approach the Union Oyster House corner. The brick buildings close in, forming a narrow throat that funnels the street noise into a sharper, more immediate buzz. I hear the clatter of crates, the hum of whispers, the snap of tension in the air. And then a scream slices through everything. "They're coming!" The words hit the crowd like a musket shot fired straight into a flock of pigeons. Bodies jolt, heads whip around. A woman drops a basket of clams, and they scatter across the ground like panicked stones fleeing for their lives. I freeze for half a heartbeat, because time travel doesn't come with training for being trampled by 18th century fear. Then the tidal wave hits. People surge forward, running, stumbling, grabbing children, dragging belongings, shoving past one another with the frantic choreography of a city not yet used to being the epicenter of revolution. A man smacks into me shoulder first, apologizes without slowing, and vanishes into the stampede like a leaf swallowed by the tide. Someone yells, "To the harbor!" Someone else shouts, "To the fort!" Someone else just screams, "No!" on loop like a traumatized songbird. I flatten myself against a wall, lantern hugged tight to my chest, trying not to be swept up in a large-scale reenactment of every man for himself. Barrels topple. A cart overturns. A dog bolts between legs, barking at absolutely nothing but the overall vibe, which is, to be fair, terrifying. The crowd pivots around the corner like a single organism with too many legs. I watch as a man dives over a crate to avoid the crush, landing on the cobblestones with a grunt and a muttered, "Lord preserve me from fools in redcoats." The panic reaches a fever pitch. Shrieks, boots, clattering wood, until someone near the front of the chaos screams, "Stop! Stop! It's just a wagon!" And there it is, a wagon, a simple wooden supply wagon, being pulled lazily by a horse, with the gait of a creature entirely unimpressed by human panic. The driver blinks at the crowd, like he's wondering if someone slipped madness into the morning water supply. The wave of people slows, breaks apart, then reassembles as a collection of very embarrassed individuals, pretending they absolutely knew it wasn't British troops the whole time. Someone coughs loudly. Another kicks at a loose stone, studying it with scholarly intensity. A woman retrieves her clam basket and mutters, "Well, better safe than sorry." I push off the wall, brushing dust from my coat as the wagon creaks past, unaware that it nearly launched Boston's first unofficial marathon. The air still hums, raw, electric, trembling, with something that isn't fear but isn't calm either. It's anticipation, the kind that makes your stomach feel like it's trying to climb into your lungs for a better view. I walk slowly along the corner, passing the oyster house's wooden facade. The scent of cooked shellfish drifts into the street like an accidental peace offering. A man leans against the tavern door, hand over his heart, muttering something about nearly meeting his maker over a horse and a plank of wood. Above us, the sky glows pale gold, the kind of sunrise that doesn't promise comfort so much as witness. Boston is a powder keg wearing a colonist's waistcoat. And the fuse? The fuse is already lit. The false alarm dissipates, but the unease stays behind, like a guest refusing to leave the tavern after last call. Every face I see carries it, the knowledge that today is teetering on a knife's edge. Arguments at Faneuil Hall, powder in crates, loyalists chased through alleys, cannons testing their voices. From where I stand, it feels like the entire city is inhaling at the same time. I take a slow breath of my own, tasting salt, smoke, and the metallic tang of fear. This, I whisper to the emptying street, is what a nation looks like just before it takes its first breath. And with that, I step forward, toward the next corner, the next fracture in history, the next heartbeat in a city learning what freedom costs before it even knows its name. Chapter 4. Heat, Hunger, and the Sparks of Rebellion. The North End market streets feel less like part of a city and more like someone upended a pantry and a parliament meeting onto the same cobblestones. The July heat sits low and heavy, like it's trying to steam everything on the street. Fish, bread, tempers. The air is thick with overlapping smells. Salt and tar from the harbor. Fish that have had a long, emotional morning. Yeast from rising loaves. And sweat from people who have not discovered deodorant and are instead relying on airflow and God's mercy. I move slowly, letting my boots fall soft, weaving through stalls and barrels and baskets. Women haggle over prices with the kind of intensity that would make a general proud. A fishmonger slaps a cod down on a table so hard it sounds like a slap in an argument. Somewhere behind me, someone laughs too loud for this hour, the kind of laugh that has rum doing most of the work. A tavern door to my left crashes open so hard it bounces off the wall. Two men tumble out in a tangle of fists, elbows, and very strong opinions about governance. "You'd sell your soul to the king," the first man roars, trying to land a punch and mostly hitting the concept of air. "And you'd trade your children for a seat in that damned Congress." The second wheezes, swinging back with the coordination of a half-asleep octopus. They crash into a stack of crates. The crates lose. Apples roll across the street like they're attempting escape, bumping against my boots. Gentlemen, I murmur, stepping aside. Nothing says reasoned political discourse like attempted murder before noon. A third man, who clearly drew the short straw of friendship, bursts out after them and tries to pry them apart. Think of the cause, he shouts. I am thinking of the cause. One of them snarls, landing a solid hit on his friend's jaw. He voted against my brother's petition. The other spits a bit of blood, grins a mostly toothed grin, and slurs, "Your brother's an idiot." There's a collective ooh from the small crowd that is formed. Because humans are the same in every century, we will always gather when bad decisions go live. An older woman with arms like tree trunks leans out a nearby window and tosses water down on them. It misses the fighters completely and drenches me instead. The woman squints, realizes she has hit the wrong idiot, and calls down, "Apologies, lad." I give her a little bow and shake the water from my sleeve. No worries. Probably the cleanest I'll be all day. The fighters finally break apart, chests heaving, pride in tatters. One of them is missing a shoe. Both of them are still shouting about the vote, the king, the future, and at one point, someone's terrible ale, possibly the truest casualty of the argument. I skirt the chaos, slipping between spilled apples and fragments of cheap dignity. For the record, I whisper to no one in particular, alcohol rarely improves political debates. It just makes the losing side louder. The market noise follows me as I move deeper into the north end, toward a quieter street where the wood-framed houses lean over the road, like they're sharing gossip. The crowd thins. The sound of the harbor softens behind me, folding into the background hum. Ahead, a modest wooden house sits close to the street, familiar, solid, unassuming. Paul Revere's place. If he knew how many tourists would one day take photos of his front door, he might have installed a better fence. Children swarm the lane here like sparks shaken from a fire. They dart between adults, shrieking and laughing, hands full of mischief. A little girl holds a twist of paper stuffed with mystery powder. Two boys clutch lengths of twine that are absolutely not approved by any regulatory authority that has ever existed. I slow my pace. They crouch around a cracked bit of cobblestone like junior alchemists, assembling something that looks dangerously enthusiastic. One of the boys strikes a flint. The tiny scrape of metal rings out, sharp and bright. A few sparks leap, catch on the end of a twine fuse, and suddenly it begins to hiss. "Stay. Back!" one of them crows, grinning with all the confidence of someone who hasn't yet learned what can go wrong. The fuse spits and sizzles. The children hop backward, watching, thrilled. I follow the line of burning twine with my eyes. It leads toward a compact paper tube, their homemade firework, and that sits only a few feet from a parked wagon. The kind of wagon stacked with barrels. The kind of barrels marked with symbols that say, "If this goes up, you will learn to fly for a very brief and final moment." Ah, I breathe. Excellent. Nothing says "Happy Fourth" like involuntary atmospheric travel. A woman catches sight of what's happening and lets out a scream so piercing it actually startles the fuse. "No!" she shrieks, bolting forward, skirts fanning out behind her. The nearest adults snap into motion. A man drops the sacks he's carrying. Grain spills in a soft rush across the road like a miniature landslide. Another dives from a stoop, hat flying from his head, feet skidding on the cobblestones. The hissing fuse snakes closer. The man reaches it in 3 desperate strides and stomps down with his boot so hard it's like he's trying to crush not just the spark, but the entire concept of combustion. There's a faint pop, a puff of smoke, and then silence. The wagon doesn't explode. The barrels don't combust. The children don't become a cautionary constellation over Boston. The man stays braced over the fuse for a long second, one hand on the wagon, shoulders heaving. Then he looks up, eyes blazing, and roars, "Are you trying to blow us all to kingdom come?" One of the boys, to his credit, at least looks guilty. The other mostly looks impressed by how far the fuse got. The woman rushes in, grabbing 2 children by their collars and hauling them back like misbehaving puppies. She starts scolding them in a rapid-fire stream about brains, blessings, and the Lord not handing out extra lives. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The smell of scorched twine and singed paper curls up in the air, thin and bitter. A nervous laugh rolls through the gathered adults. Too sharp, too high, the sound of people who realize just how close they came to becoming historical footnotes in a very short paragraph. "Idiots," someone mutters. "Brave idiots," another says. "Future soldiers," a third sighs, like he's already exhausted by the thought. The man who stomped the fuse looks at the children, then at the barrels, then at the street. His anger drains away, leaving something heavier behind. "Use that fire in your hearts for the right thing," he says finally, voice low. "The king's got enough powder. Don't hand him yours." The children nod, eyes wide. One of them quietly tucks the failed firework into his pocket, like a relic. I glance back toward the center of town, where arguments still ring and rumors still crawl along the streets like stray dogs. Then I look at the wagon that nearly went sky high. Rebellion comes in a lot of forms. Sometimes it's committees and documents and speeches in halls with bad ventilation. Sometimes it's muskets lined up on a hill, bayonets sharp, orders shouted. And sometimes it's a child with a match and no fear yet built into their bones. As I move away from Revere's street, the sun has climbed higher, painting the rooftops in a hot, honest light. The air is full of smoke that hasn't quite decided whether it belongs to cooking fires or cannon tests. Somewhere, a bell rings. Somewhere else, a dog barks at nothing in particular. Boston is walking a tightrope strung between empire and experiment, fear and fireworks. I adjust my grip on the lantern and keep walking. There are church steeples ahead and hills where the dead will one day watch the living argue about what this day meant. The harbor wind tugs at my coat as if trying to hurry me along. History is not just coming, it's already here, breathing down the neck of every street. Chapter 5. The harbor watches as secrets move. The climb up Copp's Hill feels like walking into a place where the living are only tolerated as temporary guests. The ground rises sharply, giving a long view of the harbor and its restless British ships. Masts like needles, sails like folded wings, waiting for their next command. But up here, among the crooked gravestones, the world feels quieter. Too quiet, actually. The kind of quiet that suggests the dead are listening, and the living are trying not to disturb them. The wind sighs its way through the grass, brushing against stones leaning at odd angles like they've grown tired of holding history upright. Names carved into slate have begun to blur. Even the weather seems uncertain about who deserves to be remembered. I step carefully between markers, my lantern swinging low, casting long shadows that stretch and bend like they're trying to escape their owners. It's peaceful, eerily peaceful. Peaceful in a way that suggests something is wrong. And then I see him, a man moving between the stones with far too much purpose. Not the slow, wandering kind of walk people take when visiting graves. Not the careful, mournful shuffle of someone grieving. This man moves like a thought trying not to be overheard. Quick, angled, alert. His coat is colonial cut, but the satchel bouncing at his side? Oh, that's British. Very British. The stitching screams London, the way a bad wig screams, I am absolutely wearing a bad wig. He glances over his shoulder. Once. Twice. His eyes cut across the graveyard like knives wrapped in politeness. A spy. Of course Boston has spies. Boston has multiple flavors of spies. The whole city is basically a tavern brawl conducted with paperwork, but seeing one up close is different. He slips between gravestones like a shadow apprenticing to become smoke. He bends near one marker, checks something carved at the base. Some code, some rendezvous sign, some meet me behind the crypt, bring the good tea. Then he straightens and vanishes into the crooked rows as though the earth opened and politely escorted him away. I stand there in the stillness he leaves behind, listening to the faint clink of something metal disappearing into the distance. The dead say nothing. They never do. But it feels as if the hill itself inhaled sharply and is waiting to see what happens next. I follow the downward slope toward the old North Church yard, where lanterns glow like soft stars trapped behind glass. The air changes as I approach, thickens, tightens, coils like it's trying to hold everything still. The yard is full of people clustered in low murmurs, fishermen in coarse shirts, merchants in waistcoats, widows gripping prayer books, apprentices still dusted in flour from morning bread. Everyone is whispering. No one is exhaling. The church tower rises overhead, solemn and steady. The same tower, Revere, once watched from Saddle Row. But tonight it feels like the entire world is holding its breath under those steeple shadows. A man near the gate leans close to a friend, voice trembling. Do you think they've signed it? A woman nearby answers without looking up. Signed what? Freedom? Treason? Depends who you ask. Another man cracks his knuckles nervously and mutters, if they've declared independence, God help us. Or bless us, someone else counters. Ah, yes. Nothing like an anxious, theological debate in the dark to really flavor the evening. I weave between the clusters. Everyone's faces flicker between hope and dread with each swing of a lantern. The stillness is electric, like a storm that hasn't made up its mind yet. Over by the far wall, two young boys crouch together, sharing a scrap of newspaper with the intensity of spies. Actual children, not the one I saw among the graves earlier. One whispers, they say the Congress has been shut up for days. The other whispers back, they say Adams was shouting again. Which, historically speaking, is a very safe bet. Farther along, a group of older men huddle around a bench, voices low but urgent. If independence is declared, one says, every British cannon in that harbor will be aimed at these streets. Let them aim, another growls. I'd rather die free than bow again. His friend grabs his arm. Don't say that too loud, he hisses. Loyalists have ears. Good, the man says. Let them hear. I keep walking, letting the whispers swirl around me like smoke. The church stands tall above us, a silent judge waiting to deliver its verdict. A woman near the steps lifts her candle and murmurs, "Whatever today brings, nothing will ever be the same after." Her voice isn't fearful. It isn't triumphant. It's something heavy, solemn, like she's aware that history rarely gives gifts without asking something back. The spy from Copp's Hill flickers across my memory, his hurried steps, his guarded movements, his British satchel. Secrets are already moving through the cracks of this city. Whispers are already becoming weapons. A man passing by mutters, "Philadelphia takes its time." Another replies, "Freedom does too." I stop near the edge of the crowd, letting the lantern light brush against the churchyard wall. My heart feels like it's leaning forward, the way the entire city seems to be leaning, toward news that hasn't yet arrived, toward a future no one fully understands. Boston is suspended in the moment before the first breath of a nation. One word from Philadelphia could ignite the city or break it. And in the shadows between gravestones and church steps, spies and patriots and frightened families all listen to the same silence, waiting, listening, clinging to the last seconds before history decides who they are. The air is so still it almost rings. And the harbor watches it all. Its waves slap the stones softly, a low rhythmic heartbeat, reminding us that time hasn't stopped, only paused, just long enough for the world to rearrange itself. I tighten my grip on the lantern. The final climb is ahead. Something enormous is coming. Something loud, something permanent, and everyone here can feel it humming in their bones. Chapter 6. A New World, spoken out loud. Climax. The crowd below the old State House is already trembling by the time I squeeze my way into it. Bodies press shoulder to shoulder. Sailors smelling like salt and stubbornness. Merchants in coats too fine for July. Mothers holding children who are far too young to understand, but far too alive not to feel the shaking air. Someone behind me mutters, "This is it." Someone ahead whispers, "Or it's another rumor." Someone near my elbow says a prayer that sounds like he's bargaining with the future. Even the cobblestones seem tense. The whole square has gone still in that strange way cities sometimes do. Like the day itself has pulled up a chair to listen. Above us, the old State House balcony looms. A small rectangle of wood and authority. A hatch to whatever comes next. A man steps out, and everything stops. People clutch hats to chests. Children freeze. A sailor who had been coughing stops mid-hack and swallows it like the world's most disciplined lung patient. The man on the balcony holds a roll of parchment in hands that do not shake, because if they did, the universe might actually tilt. He unrolls it slowly. So slowly, I start to wonder if this is some sort of 18th century performance art. Then he clears his throat. The sound is tiny, insignificant, but it drops into the silence like a match in dry brush. He begins, "We declare that these united colonies are free and independent states." There it is. The words slice the air clean open, like a blade through taut cloth, like lightning finding purchase, like history, finally deciding to speak in a voice loud enough for the living to hear. For half a heartbeat, nobody reacts. They just absorb it. And then, a scream, a laugh, a sob tearing loose from someone's ribs. A woman collapses to her knees with both hands clamped over her mouth. A boy jumps straight into the air, shouting nonsense and joy all at once. A man near me whispers, "My God, they actually did it." Voices collide. rise, fall, break into fragments. The whole square erupts into sound. Raw, human, unrehearsed. I feel it tremble up through my boots, into my spine, into someplace I don't usually let the world reach. This isn't celebration. Not yet. This is disbelief cracking open. This is every fear, every rumor, every impossible dream hitting daylight at the same time. The parchment curls back into the reader's hands, and the balcony becomes a silhouette against the sky. A man who just changed the world by saying the quiet part very much out loud. I move with the crowd, as it spills into the streets like a shaken tide. People run. People embrace. A man grabs my shoulders, shakes me once, laughs, and disappears into the noise like joy wearing boots. Boston Common unfolds ahead, a wide green field swallowing the last pieces of doubt. Continental militia gather there, sweating under the heat, gripping muskets, eyes bright as flint. Someone shouts for them to raise their hats. They do. Ragged hats, worn hats, hats that have seen more mud than daylight. They shoot upward like a flock startled into flight. 100 muskets follow, pointed skyward, angled toward a future that is not promised to be kind, but at least now belongs to them. They don't shout victory. They shout disbelief, relief, a kind of trembling hope that looks like courage learning how to walk. I stand in the middle of it all, lantern swinging low, feeling the weight of the moment settle into my bones. A nation has just been born, not quietly, not perfectly, but undeniably. A scream into the summer air, a declaration carved into parchment and breath. Tonight there will be bonfires, prayers whispered through tears, songs sung off key but with absolute conviction, families sitting on stoops trying to understand what freedom tastes like. And somewhere, maybe in a tavern, or on a rooftop, or leaning against a cannon that still smells of powder, someone will whisper, "We did it." I take one long breath, the kind you say for miracles or mourning, and let the night settle around me. Rest easy, sleepyheads. The rabbit hole of time holds many more slow steps. Until we meet again, Silas is signing off.